Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
And welcome. Access to Democracy returns. And we have with us John Shaughnessy, who today is a fireman. Now I have to explain that. Doing a show like this for 16 years, we get used to a little bit of everything. But we had an emergency today. Our scheduled guest, number one, was unavailable. So we tried to get one of our legislators, and it ended up he was unavailable. And John, who's a vice president here at Thomson Reuters for 17 years here, vice president of business communications, and was busy eating his lunch when I walked into his office and I said, how'd you like to do the 1:30 interview today?
17 years on the job, and I finally get the invitation to appear on Access to Democracy.
How many times now? This is probably a half dozen that you've been with us.
It's a couple anyway, yeah. I figure it must be sweeps week.
So
you're pulling out.
That's it.
You're pulling out the big guns. You know, this is guaranteed ratings blockbuster right here.
So we caught you, and you're on your way to the airport for what for the company?
We are, actually it's a very cool deal. We're sponsoring an art exhibit in the Sea Concourse at the airport. And today is the grand opening for this exhibit, but we have pulled a bunch of the old art and the law artwork that the company has commissioned over the years, and there's actually some beautiful pieces that are part of that particular collection of work. And also pulled together a bunch of the old archival equipment and documents and one of the old Walt terminals from the warehouse. And so we've got this beautiful exhibit of materials that are there. And the theme of the exhibit is around Magna Carta, which is if anybody knows the law, it's sort of the foundational document for modern systems of law, and it's celebrating its 800th anniversary.
And it goes back, right, 800 years, and as I told you earlier, I was there at the signing, which is... You doubt that? But
yeah, it's part of King John's court, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
King John the bum.
Yes, but, well, that's the way my luck goes. But in any event, and there's a great book that Thomson Reuters put together in conjunction with that, but we'll get to that in a few minutes.
All right.
So, as Vice President of Business Communications, John, what exactly are your jobs, really?
Well, I guess the day job is to look after the reputation of the business. And a business like ours, it's easy to define, but it gets to be very complicated from day to day. And so we manage the issues that impact the business. We do all of the public relations and media relations work.
I mean, I've seen you out there a number of times, either in the paper or the press or on TV, where you're the spokesman of the corporation.
Yeah, yeah, and the trick is to represent the business effectively and make sure that all of our stakeholders, and in a community like this, there are lots of people who might not be customers of ours, but are still really important stakeholders, and we need to make sure that everybody understands what the business is doing and where the business stands on the issues that intersect this business and the interests of the stakeholders that are part of our world as well.
Keeps you on your toes in any event.
That it does. That it does. And it's more complicated than ever these days. In the old days, we dealt with print media primarily. Occasionally, there might be a broadcast story that would involve the business in some way. But today, it's a 24-hour news cycle. Social media has turned our world on its head because
Unbelievably so.
Yeah. Well, and you're
not
on
all
social media, right?
Not all to the good necessarily, but
No.
we are losing one of the things that troubles me, our art of communication, and one of the things that I'm upset about is seeing colleges in particular spend so much time on their IT and moving away from social sciences and humanities and history, which is so important. I just don't think that you can be well-rounded without a good background in those areas, and it's becoming diminished.
Yeah. I think that the sense of a good story should carry all of this. And what's happening is that people have access to these channels and they can put their story out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a good story or a compelling story, or for that matter, an accurate story.
I was going to say a true story, and there's so much misinformation.
Exactly, and we battle that stuff every day.
But Thomson Reuters is really the preeminent name in legal publishing, beyond any question. When I was practicing law, it was West Publishing. It transitioned to Thomson, which is, I think, when you came on board.
Yep.
And then Thomson and Reuters combined about 15 years ago. And in how many countries now? Over 40, I know that.
Easily over 40. I'm trying to think. I think Thomson Reuters as a business is probably operating in almost 80 countries now. Yeah, we are global.
For the lawyers and for the business community.
Yes.
And actually probably a lot for the financial community as well.
Financial, intellectual property and science and academic communities. We've got a big business in academia, and then the tax and accounting business, which is right now our fastest growing business, is a great business, primarily North American in its scope, but a very, very good business.
And personnel has changed. Quite a few people, certainly in the time that we're doing this program, in terms of even being right here. We had Rick King on a few weeks ago, who is an anchor as far as we are concerned, and a great guy. Always interesting and very involved in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing about this business. I've been here 17 years, and you and I go back a long ways. And I think we've seen the business is evolving, as they all do, and you have to in order to keep the business healthy. But there's a great foundation of people who have been here for a long time, and who have made a remarkable mark on this business. And I think that a lot of those people are still with us, and that's worth sticking around for.
It really is, and where everything is so transient in the world today, that's kind of a nice solid bedrock to fall back on.
That it is.
So, among the many things that you're involved in and that Thomson Reuters is involved in, you're doing this exhibit in, what'd you say, it was in the C area,
Yeah, the C concourse out at
the C concourse
out
of
at
the airport.
Yeah.
And what prompted this? And let's talk about that and transition into the book.
Yeah, I think the real genesis of the idea came as part of all of the work that we're doing around Magna Carta, and we've been planning a number of different events and exhibitions around Magna Carta for the past 18 months. Last November, the Library of Congress in New York opened a major exhibit dedicated to Magna Carta, and it's a remarkable exhibit still open at the Library of Congress. And we were one of the sponsors of that event. And so as we were meeting with the guy who is now the Deputy Librarian of Congress, and a remarkable guy, he's a law librarian by training. His name is David Mao, and a really interesting guy. We were talking with him about the things that we could do and the resources that we might pull together to help make this exhibit as good as it could possibly be. And as we were talking with the folks at the Library of Congress, we hit on the idea of a collection of essays from leading scholars in the law and leading academics and practitioners that could look at different aspects of Magna Carta and how it has supported the rule of law over the year. And so Tom Layton, who's a colleague here at Thomson Reuters, and who is remarkably connected in the legal community, we teed up the idea, and Tom, whose Rolodex would rival anyone's, he got started on this and in very short order recruited one of the justices from the Delaware Supreme Court, Randy Holland. And Justice Holland is a remarkable guy. And Justice Holland signed on as our editor-in-chief, and then went about the work of recruiting authors. And so in the end, we have, among the authors, the former Chief Justice of the UK Superior Court, Lord Igor Judge, who's he's one of the leading figures in
Great name
UK
for
law.
a judge.
Absolutely, Lord Judge. And then Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the foreword for the book. Brian Garner, who's the editor of Black's Law Dictionary, and a bunch of others signed on to write chapters in this book, and we ended up with just a great book of essays on Magna Carta, and we're using that now as part of all of these celebrations that have been part of the build-up to what will be the celebration in London this summer on June the 15th.
And now, is this a book that people can buy, or
Yeah,
it is?
Yep, and in fact, as a non-lawyer, I can attest that it is. You don't have to be a lawyer to read it and enjoy it. It's actually a really interesting read, and you consider the importance that Magna Carta has in our lives. It's really, it's worth reading.
Well, it's really the foundation stone of jurisprudence as we know it, both in England and in the United States.
Absolutely.
And
due
as a
process.
result, actually, of Thomson Reuters spreading into so many different countries, and people like former Supreme Court Justice Paul Anderson lecturing in so many different countries as they try to formulate their own system of jurisprudence,
You bet.
it becomes more and more important. The
Yes.
book itself is an awesome, glossy book with wonderful photos and really pictures. The whole history.
And a lot of the images were taken from the exhibit at the Library of Congress, so people get a nice sense of what that exhibit is all about.
Now, John Shaughnessy is a local guy.
Local guy.
Born where?
Actually grew up in Mendota Heights, so not far from here.
Not far from the tree.
Nope, I've left and come back a couple of times, and
And you're married. You have daughters, I believe?
Three.
3 daughters,
Yep.
yeah.
We have a senior at Colby College in Waterville, Maine, a sophomore at Madison, and our youngest is a junior at Visitation here in Mendota Heights.
And who's the photographer?
That's Franny, our youngest.
The youngest.
Yeah,
Yeah, I understand she's quite a photographer.
she is indeed. And you talk about social media. We're a little long in the tooth, but I look at how Franny and her friends embrace it and how they use it, and you can definitely see the power and the impact and the influence that social media can have. It's it's stitched into the fabric of their lives. I have to think about it before I naturally fall to it, but not so my daughter Franny.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm teaching in college for a lot of years now, although that's coming to an end in a few days, actually. It's time to move on. But during class, if we take a 10-minute break and I go around the room, everyone is sitting there with their iPhone or whatever they happen to be using in their hand, as though, it's their link to the world. We didn't have iPhones when I was a kid.
No.
We actually had a party line phone, a landline party line phone. You picked it up and somebody else was on your line. You had to wait for them to get off or beg them to get off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was a time when this was the primary link to the world, and the ability to have a conversation and to engage somebody and find out what makes them tick. And
In more than
now-
140 characters.
That's exactly right. And I, as a parent, I worry about the time that my kids spend in front of a flat screen. I do not think that serves as a proxy for getting out and really embracing life and engaging people. I mean, if we're at a point, and actually I heard this anecdotally, there are businesses that now have special training for new hires because they don't know how to either have a conversation or talk on the telephone with a customer. And I think that we need to make sure that we don't lose that.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Saddened, but not surprised.
Yeah.
And we certainly cannot afford to lose that. Also, we're moving the parameters of education and what we're emphasizing to, I think, not a good degree, as we see other countries around the world that are surpassing us in academic areas, whether it be engineering or mathematics or science. I grew up at a time when we were the greatest generation, and we were used to being number one. And that's not the way anymore, but we can't afford to fall far behind, and we are falling further behind than we should be.
Yeah, and I think it's important that schools reflect where the job market is going, but you can't do that at the expense of the liberal arts, the classics, literature, the things that bring so much to life. We don't want to lose that at all.
When we were having breakfast this morning, Sharon was looking at the paper and she said, there's an article here that says 1/3 of our children are so overweight that they don't qualify to be in the service. And that is really staggering. But then the second part of that article was the fact that they're not getting physical ed in school anymore. They're replacing it in a lot of places with IT courses, etc.
Yeah.
And I just picture a bunch of rotund little bunnies sitting in front of a screen being, the colony of couch potatoes. We can't afford that.
No, and
But,
I think it gets back to the comment I made earlier in engaging people and finding out what makes them tick. And I think we have to inspire people with ideas and activities beyond what a flat screen might show them. And I think that's going to be a challenge for society, but I think for business as well. Business needs, you need engaged and creative minds in business, because creativity is really the engine that drives a business forward.
and yeah, you're absolutely right. We lose that.
Yeah.
We lose a big chunk of what made us what we were,
Yep.
and not what we are,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, what other irons does Thomson Reuters have in the fire right now in terms of projects coming up? I know that Westlaw and Westlaw Next is all over the world, and lawyers are being trained all over the world on the products that come out of this building, in effect.
That's right. And actually, I should mention that we announced earnings this week, and the good news coming out of earnings is that the legal business is very healthy. And speaking of creativity and innovation in business, there's a lot of it going on around here. We've got products like Westlaw, which you're very familiar with, continue to just be the bedrock of this business, and they are extraordinarily powerful tools that lawyers use
And we're
to support their work.
We're seeing a very different aspect of practicing law, because we've seen something in the last few years that we never saw before. Large firms going bankrupt, firms combining with other firms to become mega firms, where they have offices all over the world and hundreds of lawyers. And yet people still rely on their local attorney
Yeah.
and the individual practitioner. And when I was practicing, I had a partner and we had a couple of other attorneys who worked for us, but still that has become a little bit old-fashioned, I think.
There's no question the market has changed pretty significantly. At the largest law firms, you're right, there have been a lot of mergers. A number of firms have gone out of business. And I think that law firms, and technology is really a driver for this, but law firms are changing the way a lot of that work gets done. And we are right in the middle of a lot of that too, because we don't just provide the legal information any longer. Now we provide software and artificial intelligence tools and all sorts of other tools that help lawyers and law firms support the needs of their large clients, and that work is growing more complex all the time. And so we're able to provide a whole new host of different products that help with their complex litigation, all of the e-discovery that's part of complex litigation, even things like legal process outsourcing. One of our most successful parts of the business is a legal outsourcing firm that uses lawyers in the U.S. and in other parts of the world to support certain parts of the litigation process. And these are all things that law firms are doing now to be more responsive and to be more efficient for their
It's
clients.
very, very different. And I know when I was practicing, and I did a lot of appellate work, I might be in the library late at night with 30 or 35 books open, looking for the right quotation and the right citation and to bolster that particular argument. And of course, you didn't bring those things into the courtroom with you. Today in the courtroom, lawyer sits with their computer open in front of the judge. They can instantly research, bring up material, etc. And it's a tremendous transition.
Yeah, it is. And the, lawyers have at their fingertips access to vast repositories of information that can help to inform the work that they're doing. And, from these huge volumes of data, they're able to find the exact points of law that can help to inform a legal strategy or help to bolster an argument for them.
And of course, we sit here in the Thomson Reuters building in a studio which is partnered with the city of Eagan, that they both utilize and has been beneficial to both corporations, thanks to the foresight of Rick King and our former city manager, Tom Hedges, who, when the idea was presented to them, jumped on it and gave us state-of-the-art equipment in a really state-of-the-art studio.
Yeah.
And benefited everybody all around. Collaboration sometimes helps as well.
Yep. Well, and that's the art and science of a relationship, right? So technology in and of itself isn't necessarily a terrible thing, and in fact, it can be a wonderful thing. I see how my kids use technology, and I have every reason to be bullish. But I think something like this is just a creative application of technology and a relationship where everybody can identify what the win is.
And I see
make it
them
happen.
doing it, and I'm in awe, because a lot of it is beyond what I see my grandchildren who are so conversant with the computers and everything. I'm saying, I have to ask them for help and how to do something. But
still
the fact
got
of
it.
the matter is,
Come on.
that's the way it is.
Ah.
It's anyhow, you'll be off to Concourse C in a few
We are
minutes,
headed to the airport here shortly, yeah.
and good luck with them. I probably would like to get out there and see it. We used to have a museum here in this building of all the old equipment and the presses and everything, and that's gone now. We used to print 64 million books a year in this building.
Oh, yeah.
That's gone now.
Well,
And,
it's not 64 million, but it's still a healthy part of the business.
yeah, there are millions of books printed here,
Yeah.
but we don't touch that anymore. And the type of equipment, the linotype equipment, and the things that we were used to in the hot lead, again, they're all replaced by these little machines.
Oh, yeah.
And time for nostalgia. Time for John Shaughnessy, who stepped in. I said he was a fireman, and he really is. Joined with us today, and I thank you for that, and bring us a little bit up to date as we ramble on.
Absolutely.
And I thank you, John, for coming down here and filling in an emergency.
It's always
And
fun.
Always fun.
Thanks.
Again, soon.